during the making, you always had the hope that the execution will not be happening, will not be carried out. Can you tell us a little bit about the process? You worked for several years on the film. How did Marco find you? How did you come together? And how you were involved more and more?
Marco's the same age as I, 54. He was. He used to go along the beach, used to surf, and he used to hang glide. So he wasn't my friend, my real close friend, but we hanged around some beaches, some parties, some places. And then he moved. He moved to live in the States, and then he went to Amsterdam. So we lost contact. I met him once or two times in Bali. I used to go surfing there too. And in 2007, after 4 years on death row, he decided to do this film. He called me up, and I said, Marcos, I want to tell my story, and I think you're the right director. And then I said, wow, that's... In the beginning it was kind of interesting because from the friends and the people who were working, trying to get him out there was this news that he's going to get out. He's going to get out. The Brazilian government is negotiating, the Indonesian government, there's a good commercial relationship between the two countries. They will never execute the Brazilian. And the diplomacy was working, everything was, seemed to be that he was going to go away. So I felt interesting because I would have him, his story, his biography, his 11 years spent in prison, and afterwards he would be released. And then I would film him for more 3-4 years. So it was a long-term project. And that was the motivation, initial motivation. I said, I don't want to do a tragic film where a guy is executed. So I believed, and he believed, he made me believe that he was not going to be executed. So in 2012, he was announced, one more time he was announced that he was going to be executed. And we were talking on the phone, like in many undeveloped countries, like Brazil and Indonesia, whenever the cells are closed at around 8 o'clock, the antennas go up and everybody can talk on the phone, their cell phones. So I used to talk on the phone a lot along these years before 2012. So after the execution was postponed again, I told him, why we don't start doing a documentary that would be the base for a feature film maybe. And he said, all right, that's a good idea, because a friend of him was going to write a book, and from that book I would do an adaptation for the feature film. So I said, okay, let's do the right thing. So you're going to write a document seizing me your rights, and I'm going to pay you for it. Let's do a professional job on it, believing he was going to be released. So after some time, he decided, he calls me up and said, Marcos, I put a camera aside. I was trying to get a formal interview from the Brazilian embassy. And they said, no, you're not going to do a documentary because we're negotiating his release, and your film's going to spoil our work. You're going to expose the guy. I said, no, look, I'm doing a long-term job. I'm not going to harm or damage the image of Curumim. I want him out. He said, no, you're not going to be allowed. We're not going to work on that formal interview. So, second thing I did was, as Curumim had a camera inside of a forbidden place, I said, Curumim, I don't think it's a good idea for you to have a camera now, because if you go into solitary, because you're caught with a camera, and there's a filmmaker behind, it's going to fall over my shoulders. He said, no, I'm going to film myself here. And I said, okay, at your own risk, own responsibility. but don't do it. I don't want you to do it. He said, look, I cook for the director of the Presidium. The director comes to my room and I cook him special food, special plates. I teach everybody here, all the guards love me. I teach them to play tennis. And I say, okay, you do it, but you're at your own risk. So that was probably the main thin line that was kind of thinking about what I was doing there.
Making a film like this, I mean, apart from the fact that the ending turned out how you didn't want it, how you didn't expect it, which was not the plan at all, but apart from that, when you're involved in such a story that's so high profile, that a Brazilian is on death row in Indonesia, embassies working at it, human rights associations working at it. How do you feel as a filmmaker at the time while you were doing the film? What can you do for him if they are saying, for instance, please don't spoil our diplomacy? And what were you able to do during the process, and how drawn in did you feel to have to do something to help Marco?
Yeah, of course I didn't want to spoil the negotiations, and as I had put to myself, this is going to be a long-term project. So I was we're talking on the phone, establish a relationship of recording our telephone calls, so we would speak. We built up a relationship for 3 years, talking every week. So I would record his stories, his past, his biography. And I asked him to write it down also. Write down some stories. And of course I didn't want to be in the middle of the negotiation because the main goal was to see him out. And I need to have a formal interview so I could tell his story better now. But they announced the execution of Marco a month before he was executed. So there was like the 7th time that they did that. They always find a way of appealing, so it never happened. No other presidents of Indonesia had the courage to execute the traffic guys, the foreign traffic guys. But Joko Widodo decided to do it. Maybe because he was politically, he had been only the governor of Jakarta for 2 years when he became president. So he was very compromised with all parts. And probably to get strengthened, because Indonesia for the death penalty, the population. So maybe his decision on executing those guys was to get strengthened, stronger, related to their own people. But Marco didn't believe. And unless, probably in the last week, when you hear those final calls, that he kind of, maybe I'm going to be executed. And that was terrible. It was really a shock for me because I was taking the project as, oh, time's going to pass by, he's going to be released soon. And suddenly, he may be executed, and he was. So I thought about, shit, that was not the plan. Should I do the film? Should I cool down? Should I wait? And then I decided to go for it. I said, okay, let's not make his death useless. Let's try to make what happened to him either as an example for the kids, or either to build up a discussion about death row and justice. And he deserved to be executed because he was smuggling cocaine. It's a deep discussion.
Yeah, I think, and he has a lot to say in the film about that. He tells us a lot about that in the filming he does with himself. Please, we will take your questions. We have time for a few questions from the audience. Please raise your hand. Yes, over to the mic. Can you speak up, please?
I wanted to know what happened what happened to his mother, and he was talking about an aunt at the end about selling the apartment. Was that real, or what was the story with that?
The mother died in 2010, and his last parent was the aunt that's alive. And Curumim believed that he could bribe the justice system in Indonesia as Yuri, the Italian guy, did. Of course, they were in different positions, but he believed if he had money, he could bribe the system. So it's mentioned in the middle of the film, the first third, the situation of the apartment. The guy who's speaking on the phone, he said, yes, with money, let's sell your apartment. It's worth $800,000. So he was insisting on that. If he had sold the apartment and brought the money to Indonesia, he could achieve what Yuri achieved. But probably wouldn't work. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know that much Indonesian. Of course, what happened to Yuri shows a bit how Indonesia treats their own justice.
Okay, if from Mexico, if I understand, was a 3 years project during you were in contact with him before that? When you have the idea to make that documentary film, and if he took the own responsibility for the filming in the prison, which is some kind of very special prison because they have their own kitchen and they have some, it's quite different than what we think was a prison. And the last scene when he was executed, how was it possible to film that? Because it's done, it's him, but how was it possible? Because, okay, in his room, he was on charge, but outside, at the last moment, I would like to know how was it possible.
Okay, the last scene is a reenactment. It wasn't him. It's impossible to film an execution. So I recreated the way the Indonesians do. And that's a special prison. I mean, prisons in Indonesia are the same as in Brazil and Mexico, probably. Crowded ones, no treatments, and the prisoners, in time, they probably don't survive. But that prison, that Curumim and the other 67 international drug dealers were, together with other 300 Nigerians, traffic dealers too. That was the only special prison that Indonesia built up in that way, with soccer fields and tennis court and supermarket and restaurant. So that was for the international public to see, oh, look how Indonesian prisons are. But they are not the way it is. That's a real different prison. But I missed your first question. He invited me in 2007. Only in 2012, we decided to do the documentary. That was going to be a feature film in the beginning. His idea was to do a feature film. So the documentary started in 2012.
How did you work with the footage? Did you get the footage? Did you get the footage along the whole process, or did you only get it in the end? Were you able to also direct him along the whole filming process, or no?
Well, I was receiving the memory cards along the 3 years. Every 4 months, every 6 months, every 6 months I would receive those memory cards. And in two of the scenes where he's speaking on the phone, he's speaking with me. So for sure I was directing him, I was asking him questions. And of course, just a bit odd what was recorded, it's in the film, but sure, relate. I could write to him and ask him questions, getting my curiosity about things that happen in his life. Sure.
Mark, what did you feel when that? What were your emotions?
In the beginning, well, we were having like a professional relationship, but with time and seeing how Curumim, discovering his life and discovering his choices, we started getting affectuated. I really felt like he became a friend of mine. So I felt really bad when he was executed. I felt really bad for the whole thing. Unfairness of the penalty he got, even though he knew Indonesia had a death penalty sentence for trafficking. If you can see, Yuri's the guy who went to Brazil to get 5 kilos of cocaine left by Curumim. And that 5 kilos was going to be brought to Indonesia and sold, and the money would be to bribe the whole system that Yuri ended up doing it. So Curumim had that belief that even if he was caught, he would have one last chance. And so the whole thing it's very crazy. It's a very courageous, stupid thing that he did. And, for sure he had to pay for it, but not with life, in my opinion. So I didn't feel too good.
We have time for one more question in the hall, and then we can speak outside. She's the lady at the back who wanted to ask before.
So I'll come back to the question of the scene of the execution. And I would ask you, of course, you were making decisions on what you would show and what you would not show. So all the things about how Brazil react to this, we haven't seen. How it was, I mean, not his friends, but the government and everything, but we saw him dying. So why did you decide to reenact the act of the execution in the end? It was an aesthetically decision, it was a narrative decision, what is that?
It's because it's barbaric. Being shot in the chest, lasting 15 minutes, waiting 15 minutes to die, it's unbelievable. Executing someone is unbelievable for me. I'm against death penalty, but I wasn't static at all. It was narrative. Curumim was experiencing his last week of existence, and I thought it was much stronger to show how a person dies in front of a firing squad with his thoughts along, then showing the Brazilian reaction, the Facebook, 50% of Brazil saying bad guys should die. And so I thought it was stronger and more impactful for the public that wants to discuss death penalty to see how a firing squad is done, even if it's in a reenactment.
Marcos, thank you. It's a great honor to have you film in your run. It's really good that you could come. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing the film. Please tell your friends and vote for the film. It's award.